They cleared thousands of hectares of fertile land deep in Gambella. Giant tractors from India rumble across fields where livestock once grazed, tens of thousands of farmers uprooted, wheat as far as the eye can see planted, harvested, exported. But here's the twist. While Ethiopia's wheat revolution promises to feed millions across the ocean in Washington, alarm bells are ringing. What is India's endgame? How did the US suddenly become a skeptic? And who really wins when land, food, and power collide in this scale? Stay tuned, because the answers begin with a single contract that few knew about and lead to consequences that could reshape global food lines. India has been ramping up its involvement in large-scale commercial farming in Ethiopia for years. Some of those deals date back to the food price shock of 2008. India needs more food security, and its domestic agricultural land is under pressure from population growth, shrinking farm sizes, water scarcity, and climate change. Ethiopia, on the other hand, has abundant arable land, especially zones that are less densely populated. The government has pushed policies to attract foreign investment in agriculture, allocating huge tracts of land for commercial farms. Among Indian firms, some have acquired hundreds of thousands of hectares in regions like Gambella. But many of these deals have met with criticism: delays, underutilized land, environmental concerns, displacement of local people. At this point, you might think India is just trying to feed its people, but this next part reveals there's more at stake. Are they exporting influence, not just wheat? Reports from NGOs suggest that about 8,000 people have been displaced by Indian agricultural companies in Ethiopia. In Gambella, home to the Nuer and Anuak peoples, lands have been cleared even within ecologically sensitive zones with little consultation or compensation. Forests, wildlife, customary land rights all under threat. There are also questions of productivity. Many of the lands under lease are not being fully cultivated. Sometimes the infrastructure, irrigation, roads is lacking. Sometimes investors overestimated yields or underestimated costs. But land disputes and ecological woes are just one side. On the other, there's a quiet transformation of trade, diplomacy, and food markets that almost nobody is paying attention to. India's food demands are enormous. Growing population, changing diets, climate threats makes the idea of outsourcing production or securing overseas farmland more appealing. Commercial farms in Ethiopia could produce surplus wheat for export or buffer against supply shocks. Ethiopia gets investment, infrastructure, jobs in theory, and can scale up agriculture faster than many of its smallholder farms allow. This partnership positions Ethiopia as a food hub in East Africa. But this also gives India strategic leverage, not just over food supply but over political partnerships, regional influence, and trade corridors. Controlling part of the supply chain and securing raw materials abroad has always been part of big powers' playbooks. And while India does this, the US watches and worries, because there's a flip side to all this that could affect global power and trade lines. First, trade competition. The US is a major wheat exporter. If Ethiopia begins producing large volumes of wheat or other grains with Indian backing, some of that could compete with US agricultural exports, especially into African markets. Then, diplomatic influence. Countries like Ethiopia are not just recipients of aid. They are strategic partners. Whoever invests heavily in infrastructure, agriculture, or trade gets influence. The US has long seen Africa as part of its sphere of diplomatic and strategic interest. India's rise there is reshaping that balance. Also, there are worries over standards, environmental, labor, and land rights standards. The US civil society groups and multinational institutions often push norms around human rights, land tenure, sustainable farming, transparency. Some of the Indian-Ethiopian deals are under scrutiny for failing on many of these fronts. But, perhaps most importantly, there's the matter of dependency and sovereignty, both for Ethiopia and for regions reliant on imports, and this could lead to tensions that are rarely disclosed publicly. Many large-scale agricultural investments don't deliver projected yields. Delays in land development, underinvestment in irrigation or machinery, bad soil, climate variability, logistical issues all can reduce productivity dramatically. Ethiopia has seen some farms leased but unused. Displacement and social unrest are real risks. When local people lose land or access to grazing or water, tensions build. There's evidence of local protests and even attacks on investor property. Environmental degradation. Large farms often clear forests, change water flows, use fertilizers, potentially harm biodiversity. These costs may be borne locally, while financial rewards flow to investors. So, while the promise is big, the pitfalls may be bigger. But what will decide whether this project turns into a win, a disaster, or something in between, and how the U.S. may try to intervene or push back is still unfolding. The U.S. might respond diplomatically, conditioning aid or trade preferences on human rights, land rights, or sustainability. It could push Ethiopian partners to adopt stricter standards or transparency in their contracts with India. There's also trade policy leverage, tariffs, trade agreements, competitiveness. If U.S. wheat begins to lose markets or sees price pressures, U.S. producers will lobby their government. We've already seen U.S.-India trade talks stall over agriculture, corn, wheat, soybeans, dairy. Another possible outcome: Ethiopia may renegotiate terms, demand better local benefit jobs, revenue, infrastructure, social services, or push back on foreign ownership of land, or India may face internal and external pressure for accountability. And as these shifts happen, the most surprising twist might be how small farmers, often left out of headlines, shape this story, ending in unexpected ways. In the end, the story of India's wheat farms in Ethiopia is not just about wheat. It's about land and people. It's about who controls food, who profits, and who bears the costs. India's ambitions meet Ethiopia's eagerness, but also its vulnerabilities. The U.S. isn't just watching, it has reason to worry. Over markets, influence, values. Will Ethiopia's wheat fields become a symbol of uplift, feeding people, creating jobs, bolstering sovereignty? Or will they become cautionary tales of broken promises, unfair deals, and communities pushed aside? Only time will show, but one thing is clear: the harvest won't just be wheat. It will be power, politics, and who holds the reins. If you zoom out, India's wheat push in Ethiopia isn't just about agriculture. It's part of a much bigger global contest over who feeds the world. Food is power, and whoever controls supply chains controls politics. China has already been buying farmland in Africa. The Gulf states have long leased land to secure food for their populations. Now India is stepping in, not only to secure wheat but to establish itself as a leader in South-South cooperation. Ethiopia becomes the proving ground. If this experiment succeeds, it could inspire copycat projects across Africa, and that's what unsettles Washington most, because the U.S. has traditionally used food aid as a tool of influence. If African countries can feed themselves or rely on new partners like India, America's leverage weakens. But here's the kicker: the competition isn't just about Africa's soil. It's about rewriting who sets the rules of the global food game, and that's a battle that is only just beginning. In the end, the story of India's wheat farms in Ethiopia is not just about wheat. It's about land and people. It's about who controls food, who profits, and who bears the costs. India's ambitions meet Ethiopia's eagerness, but also its vulnerabilities. The U.S. isn't just watching, it has reason to worry. Over markets, influence, and values. Will Ethiopia's wheat fields become a symbol of uplift, feeding people, creating jobs, bolstering sovereignty? Or will they become cautionary tales of broken promises, unfair deals, and communities pushed aside? Only time will show, but one thing is clear: the harvest won't just be wheat. It will be power, politics, and who holds the reins.